Welcome to another episode of Empower Apps. I'm your host, Leo Dian. Today, I'm joined by Natalia Panferova. Natalia, thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, really excited to be here.
Yeah, so you're somewhat famous in the community for Nil Coalescing, but I'll let you go ahead and do the introduction.
Hi, I'm Natalia. I'm based in New Zealand and I'm an iOS developer and macOS developer now as well. So I work at Nil Coalescing, which is a small company I founded together with my partner a few years ago. Yeah, we do some consulting and freelancing, and we have a blog, nilcoalescing.com/blog, where we share everything we learn while building apps and other projects we work on. And I also write books for Swift and SwiftUI developers.
But you have a new book out, right? SwiftUI Essentials. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, it just went out last week. So it's called SwiftUI Fundamentals, and it's a guide on the core framework principles and APIs. It's something I wanted to write for a while, just never got a chance to sit down and write that for a bit. Yeah, and it sort of combines my experience and my knowledge from working with SwiftUI since it was released, but also working on the core SwiftUI team at Apple from 2020 to 2022. So after I left Apple, I worked a bit in the industry, and I noticed that the framework obviously became very popular, but there are still a few misunderstandings, and some people find it quite difficult to understand how it actually works and why it works the way it does. So I was hoping that guide could help to clarify some things and help people to use the framework more effectively in their projects.
Yeah, we've done a lot of episodes on SwiftUI. People are still trying to figure everything out. We had some really great episodes with Ariel and Craig and a few other folks. So yeah, it's really glad to have you on. You actually worked on SwiftUI when you were at Apple.
Yes, I did. I worked on the core SwiftUI team. Back then we were just 10 people, and we were focusing on iOS APIs, but also like the core APIs like navigation, search, text.
You remember all that stuff that you did back then? They didn't like severance you or anything, right? Like,
yeah. I remember some. I don't remember everything, but I remember hopefully the most important things. Yeah.
So, like, what are the things that most people don't get about SwiftUI?
I think it's a bit too magical for most people. Like, it does some things and you don't know why it does them. It's trying to be really clever. So like a lot of work behind the scenes goes into like figuring out how to do the best thing out of the box. So you just like define a view and it just works, and it works differently in different contexts. So like under the hood, SwiftUI like has this environment, which we can also use for our own values or reading the values from the environment. But SwiftUI also uses that to understand what context the current view is on and how to display it in that context. It can be like completely different based on the platform, or it can be different based on where in the hierarchy it's presented. Like buttons can look completely different in navigation bar, in sidebar, in slide actions, and yeah, they just look a bit different depending on where they are.
Yeah, because that really reminds me of what Paul was saying. Paul Hudson when he was on talking about how like, yeah, it depends on the platform where it's situated. It's a markup, and then kind of you're handing it off Apple to deliver it the way they feel fit. Um, what might be some tips you have for someone who's just getting started with SwiftUI and doesn't have any knowledge of UIKit, which is becoming more often the case than not, for getting started with SwiftUI?
I think as you just get started, you don't need to know UIKit. You can just get started with SwiftUI and build probably already quite complex apps without UIKit knowledge. And I would recommend to not fight the framework, but sort of work with it. And yeah, customize things you can customize. And maybe if something is not quite working out because maybe the API is not present in SwiftUI, or you're like feeling like you're fighting it, just maybe adjust your app design a little bit. It's going to be easier and it's going to be more robust in the future, because if you try to hack it, it's just going to break with the next release probably. So that's what I try to do, like in my own projects, and when I work in companies as well, I would talk to designers saying, this is a great design, but it's going to be really difficult to implement. Can be adjusted slightly like this because it's going to be easier, faster, and it will be working better in the future as well. So that's, I think, one way to look at it. But I think like as you progress, it's still useful to learn UIKit. Firstly, because a lot of SwiftUI APIs still rely on UIKit APIs under the hood, like the push navigations, the model presentations, and then a few things you might need to integrate with UIKit to support. So I think you don't need to learn both frameworks straight away, but it's useful to know them both in the end, I think.
What are some pet peeves you've heard people tell you about SwiftUI? And what do you think are some misunderstandings that people would have to have those pet peeves, I guess? Does that make sense?
What is a pet peeve?
Ooh, what's a pet peeve? So like, oh, I hate how SwiftUI, gosh, what's a good one? Oh, like I can't, it's hard for me. Like I have to constantly do stuff with Geometry Reader because my designs aren't the way I want them to be, or I don't understand state management. It's not working the way I thought it would. Like it's things like that. Pet peeve is something that bugs you.
Yeah, I think definitely state management and like the data flow and how to structure it is a hard one for many people to get, I think, straight away, especially because it changed over the years as well. Like at first we had all of these like property wrappers and you had to understand them all and choose the correct ones. And now it's a bit less, but yeah, it just changed recently. So people just started to get the previous way and now it's a new way and it's all
Which
confusing.
do you prefer?
I use the new way now in my projects, like with observable and state, just because it's supposed to be more performant because observable object had some issues. That's why I guess observable was done.
Right.
But it took me like probably a few months to just mentally switch to the new way as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've pretty much gone all in on observation with anything that can support that OS, because that's the other issue, right? Is like if you have to support an old enough OS, then you can't use the new shiny stuff. Yeah. One of the things you've been talking about in your blog is scenes. I think that is a concept people don't understand and how they work. We kind of just have usually one scene, right? And then everything goes into that. What do you think people are missing when it comes to scenes in SwiftUI?
I think people maybe don't think about scenes so much because you create a new project and it's already there, the window group, which probably most apps use. I think the trick to understand is that it's not one scene, it's like actually multiple scenes that SwiftUI will create as people open new windows. Like it doesn't work this way on iPhone because you can only open one window of the same app. But most apps will probably still run on the iPad and there people can open multiple windows. And SwiftUI will create a scene for each window for you if you use the window group, well, which you probably will. And each scene will have a new state. So like if you have a state you want to preserve for the entire app so that it's the same consistent state in every scene, for example, you have some counter or something and you want to have it to be the same in every scene, then you have to put it on the top level in the app, because if you initialize that the state object or state inside the content view or any other view, it's going to be reset. Like it's because SwiftUI will create a new hierarchy from scratch with new state and everything for every scene. So that's something to keep in mind, I think.
I think for me, like I didn't get scenes until I started doing macOS development, because then, like you said, you could have multiple windows and things like that. I guess iPad you could have multiple scenes, right? Because technically you could have multiple windows. So, and I would assume Vision OS and I don't know about TV or definitely not watch, but yeah, that's I think where you really see where scenes are useful. What's kind of there's like scene storage and then there's app storage, and what are all those and what are they useful for?
Yeah, so these are some helpers of property wrappers that we can use to store some small amount of data and let SwiftUI manage that. So app storage is just a wrap around user defaults. So that's something you want to persist between app launches. reliably, but it has to be quite small, same as user defaults. So it could be some username or some other user setting. Yeah, just think about it, some configurations that you want to persist. You can store them there. And scene storage, it's for state management. This is something if you want to persist the app state between launches. It also has to be quite small amount of data, but it's not like SwiftUI does not guarantee it's going to be saved, because if the app is quit, it's going to be cleared, or if the app terminates and SwiftUI didn't have time to save it, it's also going to be cleared. But it's not like, it's just the app state, so it's not a disaster if it's not persisted, but it's nice if it is.
Okay.
So yeah.
It's like, does it use, so like with okay, sorry, with macOS, you have like Windows state, and that's stored somewhere in like app group, or you know what I mean? But that's different from scene storage or app storage. App storage is basically user defaults, right?
Yeah, app storage is user defaults under the hood, yeah.
Okay. So SwiftUI previews, what are some tips you have for using them? Do you always try to have a SwiftUI preview in all your views, or are you just kind of like, I give up, this isn't worth my time? Or how do you balance that, I guess?
Yeah, I try to have previews for smaller views where it's faster to build the UI, because I usually, like with SwiftUI, I don't have like mockups or something. I used to in Sketch, but now with SwiftUI, I just usually build something and see how it looks straight away. So for that, I use the previews, just to sort of design with SwiftUI. And I would do that for smaller views usually, and something like content view or some like wrapper views, I usually just delete them.
I mean, like for me, what I do is I basically do the design in a separate clean Xcode project. And like I can make the design as complicated as I want and just hard code a bunch of values and then copy it over and then put everything to a state instead or something.
Yeah, that's nice.
Pretty
that's
nice, like, because when you get to stuff like, especially if you're going to start using Swift data, or you're going to start being tied, and yes, they've added some new stuff there, but it's still not easy for those of us to get those working. Kudos if you do. But yeah, one thing I wanted to ask about was, so we talked about SwiftUI previews. Let's talk about layout, and I mentioned geometry reader and things like that. What are some ways of getting around some of the pet peeves? Sorry to use that term again. Or some of the things that bug people when it comes to layout, because I know we got some custom layout stuff that we can do now, but people still struggle, and sometimes they still end up using geometry reader and things like that. What are people doing wrong when they maybe are overusing those, or don't need to use them, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I use geometry sometimes as well. I think the important part is not to create like a cycle. If you use the geometry, you have to be careful not to like read the geometry, write it somewhere else so it re-renders, and then you read the geometry again. But it's still okay to use it. I think I know there are a few more tools now, like a few new APIs that can help us to avoid using the geometry reader. Like I saw there's container relative frames, I think, something we can use, and yeah, there are a few like things for scrolling as well that are helpful now, I think, as well. But yeah, just SwiftUI layout is also like different, right, from UIKit layout, and maybe different from a few other frameworks. So you have to sort of get it how it works, like how the size is allocated, the fact that you can't force a size on a view. It just will be the size it wants to be. How frame works, that it's actually not like, it's just another view wrapping your view. It's not like, it doesn't assign the frame to your view. It's just another view with that frame that wraps the view.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, and I remember having Chris Eidoff on and talking about how like sizes, the way they're suggested in the hierarchy, like how a size might be suggested by a parent or a child. And do you know what I'm talking about?
Let's say we have the fresh app. So, and the parent view is whatever SwiftUI creates. And then it suggests all of the space to the root view, the content view. And then the content view suggests this space to its child. And then the child says, okay, I want to be that big based on that suggestion. And then the parent says, okay, this is the space I have, and the child wants to be that big, so I will position it here. And most often it's in the middle. But like if you do geometry, for example, it will go to the top. So like the parent decides where to position the child, while the child decides how to size itself based on that proposition.
Combine. Do you still use Combine? And if so, how do you use it?
Yeah, I didn't use it that much like over the whole time because it was released with SwiftUI, and like SwiftUI obviously relied heavily on it. So I did use it when I used observable objects, but didn't use like that much of the other features of Combine because like I worked with SwiftUI for 1 year and then I started working at Apple. So like I was working on the framework. So it was like obviously the only observable object is Combine. And then,
I mean, do you have any like use cases where you use it now in any of your client apps?
I use sync sometimes, like to sync on a value. I used that when I was integrating with UIKit, and I had to observe the changes to like an observable class in UIKit. So you have to call sync to update manually your UIKit view. So that's
using like key value observation and then creating a publisher from that.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Okay. For example, you have like observable object, which is like the older way, and you have a published property, and then you can like you create the cancelable, you save it, and then you do like sync on that published property, and you get a callback when it changes, and then you can manually update your UIKit view. That's how I created a like two-way connection between SwiftUI and UIKit.
I think it makes sense when you have something that's like starts off already being a publisher, like a timer or a notification or any of that stuff. But otherwise, like if you're doing a network call, I'm pretty much been doing all async await now when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, have you had that's what I was going to say, I left Apple and was already async await all the way.
Yeah. So. Have you had any issues doing async await in SwiftUI?
I don't think I had any, but I'm not sure like 100% I'm using it every time correctly. So I'm using it and I use tasks. I know that you shouldn't be using too many tasks because it can like create way too many threads for you, and then it's going to be a problem. But I don't usually have that many tasks, so it's working okay.
How did you get started in development?
It was a while ago, and I started with Java because I was going to study computational linguistics. So I was learning like data structures, algorithms, and then I was learning Java and Python because that's like, especially Python is what was going to be used mostly. But then I got a job doing web, so I just didn't go to study in the end. I was just working, doing some front-end development. Then I learned full-stack development as well. And after that, I started learning iOS because I wanted to sort of experiment with my own projects, and it seemed like iOS was the right way to do that because it's like self-contained and small, but you can still like sell your product.
Is there anything you miss about not developing for the iPhone, I guess?
Like I still do web development now.
You could say you miss Java.
No, not really. I don't remember it anymore. I think I haven't used it for a while. But I still do web. Most of the web development I do now is with Swift because I usually like build static websites.
What are you using to build your static website in Swift?
Publish. It's by John Sandel. It's not like maintained anymore, but we have our own fork and we're trying to maintain it somewhat.
Yeah. I use it for my website, so I totally get it. So how did you end up at Apple, if you mind me asking?
I was using SwiftUI, building with SwiftUI since like the first year it was released, and I started my blog and I was publishing articles about whatever like hacks I came up with because the first version of SwiftUI was really limited. So the blog started growing and it was like in different newsletters, and I was posting on Twitter back then, and then someone from the team reached out and said, "We found your blog. It looks like you're really passionate about the framework. Do you want to come and work with us?"
That's awesome.
So I started I interviewed, and then it took like a few months to get the job in the end.
Right, of course. You've been doing macOS development lately, or are you just dabbling in it? Or I'm curious how this started, or when did you start doing the macOS stuff?
So I was doing a bit of it before even I joined Apple because I was like, oh, we have SwiftUI now. I don't need to learn AppKit. I can just do something with SwiftUI. And it was difficult, but I started sort of trying it out a bit. And then I obviously had to learn a bit more about that because I was building APIs for macOS. So it was tricky because like I don't know the platform as well as I know iOS. But yes, had to learn, had to like talk to other people who are more experienced, because like if you build like a text API, it's going to be used everywhere across all platforms. So you have to make sure it makes sense everywhere. And now recently I have more time for my own projects now as well. So I want to try to build more macOS apps just because it's a bit more fun, because it's more new for me. Lots of room for experimentation.
SwiftUI has improved a lot for macOS. So how far back did you do macOS development with SwiftUI?
I tried the first year, like
Okay.
2019.
Okay. And you were like, this is great? Or were you like, oh, because I just remember that I'd done a little bit of AppKit, not a lot. And I was just like, this is rough. Now it's a lot easier. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I think I thought the same. I thought it was quite difficult, and like the design was difficult for me as well to like understand what to do with macOS. But like with iOS, I sort of understand what I want. With macOS, it's more difficult for me.
Yeah. So, as I've been talking about on the podcast, I've been doing a lot of macOS development with Bushel. Um, and there were some articles that really interested me that you had recently. Um, building like a menu bar utility, you want to talk about that and like how cool that is and why is it so powerful to do in macOS?
Sure, yeah. I wanted to build like a tool for myself
Okay.
that I would use. Basically, I write my blog in Markdown, and the Markdown parser we use, it struggles to parse URLs for Apple Docs. Like, when they have brackets, so it like fails every time. So I have to URL encode them manually. So I'm like, I just want a tool I can like press a keyboard shortcut or something, and I just like URL encodes URLs for me. So I'm like, oh, it could be a cool project to try to build for as a macOS utility, just to learn new things, and I can use it myself as well, this way as well. So I thought menu bar would be the right thing to do because it's like quite limited functionality, maybe too much. The app with a window would be too much. So yeah, I tried using the menu bar extra, worked out mostly well. There were a few things that were tricky, like sizing the icon to like custom icon to use for the menu bar. Had to try a few things, had to go with some hack in the end. Then like presenting settings window in a way that it like behaves the same way as other settings windows, like so it comes to the front straight away, but then doesn't stay at the front. Mine stays because I used floating window for that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. Or just the fact that you can't add right click to the menu bar, like many menu bar apps, you can right click on them and they show like additional options, quit button, and I couldn't implement that. Like I couldn't find a way to implement that in my app.
Okay. Have you had to do anything with AppKit or like is it NSVU representable or any of that stuff? To like where have you found the need to do that, I guess, in your macOS app development?
So I haven't used like wrappers, but I did use app delegate, like NS app delegate.
Okay.
And
I
had
adapter?
I think it's something to do with the startup of the app. I had to do something. I think maybe it's to present. I think I wanted, like, when the app is first opened, I wanted to open because when you start a menu bar app, it just starts the icon, like with an icon in the menu bar, but it doesn't open the app. And I think I used something from AppKit to open it.
Because you want it to open the menu bar, but you also want it to show a window.
Yeah.
And that's where you were talking. I'm looking at the post right now. That's where you have that like application as agent, because then it thinks, oh, you just want like a menu bar item, whereas like no, you want a window too. So, what are some things if like you're an iOS developer and you want to build your first Mac app and you want to use SwiftUI? What are some other things that maybe somebody should know about if they're going to get into macOS development?
I think there's a few more ways to integrate with the system. And I think users will probably expect more system integration from a macOS app. That's what I'm exploring as well. Like you can add an option to start the app at startup, like a launch login item. Then you can add system services. That's what I looked at as well.
Are you looking at App Store and sandboxed, or are you looking at outside App Store?
So for now, App Store, but we are thinking of building our own platform to sell apps from our website. Especially now, we have like a book platform, so we could adapt it to sell apps. Just because it's probably going to be faster and a bit more like we would be more free to what APIs we can use.
One of the things I've had to do, speaking of like stepping back a bit, is kind of getting into the NS Window API and like assigning a NS Window delegate. I've had to do that quite a bit because there's certain things I want to do, like get rid of like the minimize button or other things like that, or changing the size. So and I know, so I started building Bushel not this year but the year before, and I know they've added some stuff for Windows in SwiftUI and macOS. Um, but that's definitely, there's a lot of power in that I've found when it comes to stepping back to the AppKit stuff when I need to. Um, I haven't even looked at the new window API in SwiftUI yet. How about not? You have a blog post on non-copyable types.
Yeah.
Um, have you gotten into that yet?
No, I wrote the blog post so that I know what they are in case I never ever need them, because it's like, oh, there's this new feature in Swift. I never used it. Maybe I should write a post so at least I know what it is.
Yeah.
Um,
How did you find it, or how did you find it being useful at all?
I think it would be probably more useful if you write some tooling. Yeah, or maybe if you do some embedded Swift. I'm not sure if it's that useful in regular apps.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, especially an iOS app, I could see how that wouldn't be um necessary, I guess. Um, yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering about that, or maybe if there's something where you wanted to, not necessarily a class, but something that you would like just kind of have one of, and you don't want to have the ability to copy it.
Yeah, I think all the examples I've seen for that's some kind of token or like some DB connection or something like that.
File stream, stuff like that.
Mhm.
So you had another book out last year, right? Called Swift Gems. Uh, what is that about, and how is that different from your new book, Swift UI Essentials?
Yeah, so Swift Gems is more like a collection of tips that I've been
Okay.
collecting over the years because I think it's fun to find this like little nuggets of information that you can use
Hmm.
like anywhere. And it's sort of a book that you can open on any page and like, oh, this is a cool Swift feature I can integrate right now into my project. And some of them are just like syntactic sugar that will make code cleaner or prettier, or some of them are for optimization purposes as well, like some ways to deal with collections that could optimize your code as well. So it's like a few different things that I've been collecting, and I thought, why not put them into a book and organize them like by topics? So it was like a fun thing to do. Especially like last year I was also employed, so I had a bit less time. So that was a perfect book to write because I could do it in the evenings. I didn't have to like sit down and write it all at once. Could like write a tip every evening.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from people where they're like, "Oh, I totally didn't know about that. That's amazing. That's in your book." That you want to tell people who haven't bought it yet, I guess.
Yeah, they mostly were quite happy and said, "Oh, there's like so many things I didn't know. That's like amazing." And I was like, "Yeah." And I also like forget those things. I'm like, I remember writing about that. I should go back to my book and see what I wrote about that so I can use it as well. So it's good for me as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally. Natalia, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Um, where can people find you and your books online?
So it's nilcoalescing.com. So Nil Coalescing is like the operator in Swift. Yeah, so the blog is nilcoalescing.com/blog, and the books is books.nilcoalescing.com. But there are links from just nilcoalescing.com as well. And I'm also on all sorts of social platforms like X, Mastodon, Blue Sky, LinkedIn. So it's at Nat Panferova on X, and Mastodon.social as well, Nat Panferova, and Blue Sky, it's also the same, Nat Panferova.
Yeah, and we'll have links to all that in the show notes, so definitely take a look at that. Thank you so much, Natalia. That was really good and super informative. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
People can find me online, Leo G. Dion. I'm on all the stuff. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast player, please post a review. Share this online, and we will talk to you again. Bye, everybody.